Using a combination of foam and other materials to insulate walls. What I've done here is I've used a couple different styles and types of rigid foam insulation here. Because I have non-standard gap widths here, it's really tricky and pretty difficult to cut and deal with soft foam insulation. In fact, this is a packaging from some. And when we're looking at insulating walls, hey, we're going to stuff anything in there. This is a good idea for getting rid of a lot of your construction debris out in the middle of nowhere, and you don't want to make dump runs. If it's under 4 inches wide, stuff it in the walls. Use it as insulation. It's an old builder's trick. They used to stuff them with old newspapers, stuff them with other wood, other construction debris, anything that's not majorly toxic or you know, would produce some sort of a chemical flame hazard. All right, so old bottles of oil-based paint or lacquer-based paint, no. But a lot of your construction debris, a lot of your construction garbage, your spare wood, your short pieces of wood, go ahead and stuff them in the walls. I'm using this rigid foam insulation because I can cut it to shape. And what I find is that this spray foam here costs about the same per volume as the sheets of rigid foam. There's no way you're going to beat that system. There's no way you beat that system with one being cheaper and more expensive than the others. And what some guys will come through is with a great big two-part machines that look like a couple of propane bottles, and they'll foam fill these walls. That works except for my framing style on here, okay? I'm framing in pretty narrow windows on these places. And so what I'm doing is a beam framing construction by combining these 2x4s, sometimes doing 3 or 4. I think right there it's 4 wide because this is basically a structural column. And so I'm doubling these up at the 2-foot interval on most of them, and then occasionally I'm tripling them up. When I go to frame a window, I'm framing fairly small windows in between those. I'm not doing conventional window framing because I don't have any gaps that are wider than what my joist normally, or my reinforcement normally would be. So that also, because it's non-standard widths on this, I'm not going to do very well with standard foam, you know, attic pink type insulation. I did use that upstairs in the loft area because I had standard spacing on the ceiling, on the whole roof and ceiling. I went with standard spacing on that, just in case we have a code inspector, even though we're under 200 square feet on the footprint here. And we've got 400 square feet to work with in counting code. I'm okay with that. But one of the things that happens is you don't want to get too fussy about precision cuts on rigid foam insulation when your spray foam costs the same per volume, right? So without getting all fussy fuss on your cuts, just, you know, smack the pieces in, and if you got a gap around the edges, you're going to fill that with the foam stuff anyway. And so what that means is anywhere there's a gap, anywhere there's openings in that stuff, we're stuffing it with foam. And, you know, that's not to mention you could also use some of your construction site debris, and you can use the cans themselves on some of these wall sections. Just stuff that can in there, and if you can kind of mark that sweet spot on the can where it's like right up against the your stuff, one of the things you can do is you can shoot a hole with about a 1/4 inch drill into that wall. All you really need to do is give the can a good nick. But if you get a good full circle hole in that can, it's going to pop and explode on the inside. It's not like it's going to throw a bunch of shrapnel around, but it will blow out all of the rest of the foam that wasn't going to come out of that tube. Because what usually happens is you can shake these cans, they run out of their ability to propel that foam before they actually run out of foam. It's just the way they are. And so by filling all of these extraneous cracks, that's how I'm making the insulation work here. Now at a later date, if I really want to add more insulation, I would drill holes in the walls and just inject more foam in. But even though I'm not going full thickness, a lot of these backwood shack type buildings aren't insulated at all. But I've also got, you know, a good layer of siding on the outside. I'm going to do a good drywall job on the inside of here. And if somebody sees these types of gaps and says, hey, what's going on with that? That's because I frame inward with scrap wood when I'm doing windows which are narrower than my structural reinforcement anyway. Okay, so we're not going to do conventional window framing when we've already done basically beam framing by combining the 2x4s, and what I end up with is 6x4s on a lot of these structural things every few feet on this. In fact, a lot of it's every 2 feet, and then the way these corners are, yeah, I think it's what they call a California corner, because there's actually 4 pieces of wood at that corner. And it's 4 or 6 pieces of wood on that corner. And so there's a lot of wood at that corner, but if there's any gap because of the way the one wall got, you know, backed over into the other wall, you know, we'll go ahead and throw a little in the crack too. But you got to not let that stuff dry fully before you're putting your drywall in, or else it's going to block you from putting your drywall in, and you got to cut that stuff back out. Now, if you ever do need to trim that stuff off, one of these cutting tools from Ryobi or a similar one from any other maker is just fine. Right now, though, I'm going to be slapping these panels on before this stuff fully hardens. Now, one of the other things is you do not want that stuff on your clothes. It is like a super glue. It's gummy. It's gooey. It will screw up your clothes permanently. You really don't want it on your skin, because it'll take a long time. It takes weeks. Like if it gets on your fingernails, it takes weeks to get out of your hands and your fingernails and all that kind of stuff. If I got some on my boot here, what you got to do is wait for that to dry and then try to pop it off. You try to rub it off, you're just rubbing it into the boot leather and stuff, and it's not going to come off. So I'm going to attach these panels, and we'll show the next stages coming up.